Arc Raiders Expedition 2 is upon us, with resets on the way, perhaps having already happened depending on when you watch this video. But a reset, gathering value for skill points and the likes, it's not a static system that will be the same forever. Embark developers have already explicitly mentioned that what we see today is, in a lot of cases, what they had time to craft for players leading up to the launch of the game. So what's the future look like? In a recent interview with PC Gamer, design director Virgil Watkins sat down and talked about the future, from things ranging from matchmaking elements to live service hurdles to new weapons, boss fight encounters, and of course, the future of expeditions. Today we're taking a look at that information to let you know a little of what's upcoming in perhaps the near future. Expedition 3 perhaps? Well, only time will tell, but the seeds of the future expeditions have been planted, so let's take a look. Let me know your thoughts down below. What would you adjust to the expedition system if it was up to you in Arc Raiders? Drop a like if you enjoy the video, and make sure to subscribe to stay up there with all things Arc Raiders and even more FPS content. I'd love to have you in the community. But for now, let's get into it. So, right now, the expedition system, as it stands, holds multiple different levels of rewards, right? Like you have the consecutive chain-based rewards that require you to continuously complete expeditions to keep them, such as the Scrappy, XP, and repair buffs. You have the permanent rewards in the way of cosmetics for your Raider and Scrappy, but additionally, there's permanent items in the way of skill points. Those aren't dependent upon consecutively doing the expeditions. Like if you did one expedition, you have upwards of 5 additional skill points whenever, 10 additional skill points if you've done 2, and so on. But one thing that should be noted is that while fundamentally those skill points may be the most appealing of those rewards, they're not going to be there forever. This was never intended to be the be-all, end-all for the entirety of Arc Raiders and how long it's supported. Right now, if you were to take a look at it, every single skill to max out all 3 branches of the skill tree would take 157 skill points. This would take 17 expeditions to acquire all the necessary bonus skill points on top of the base 76 that a player ends up getting throughout levels 0 to 75. So on 2-month intervals, like we've seen, 34 months or just under 3 years of doing expeditions non-stop to max out every single skill in theory. But again, you won't have to worry about that, as Virgil Watkins has said, so skill points probably won't hold forever. Of course, we don't want people to be able to max out the entire skill tree. That's not the way it was designed. And then, of course, at some point, we're very likely going to revamp parts of the skill tree. So then, what other elements do we make a part of the expedition system to keep it enticing? So 2 things. Number 1, skill points aren't going to be the be-all, end-all forever. So that's one of those things that we'll see changing. But also just a compound on top of that, skill points as a whole may see some adjustments here in the future at some point as well. This coming from another discussion talking about how they realize, yeah, some of these skills could be buffed, some aren't necessarily even very useful, so they're going to adjust some of those in the future, but didn't give any sort of explanation as to what that would entail. But that said, how do you then make something that is enticing to all players, something that really encourages players to do the expedition? What's another substitute, or rather additional reward, that could take the place of skill points if they don't decide to end up going that way? Well, another major element and hurdle you'll hear about with expeditions is the blueprints and their lack of ability to carry over. Just recently in our discussion about blueprints and the economy around them, 2 days ago or so, and even back to when we last talked about what you needed for Expedition 2, the resounding sentiment around that discussion with players saying that they didn't really feel like they wanted to reset was because of blueprints. For lack of better term, but also to gamify it a little bit, a gear fear that you, logically, didn't want to spend another 50, 100, 200 hours searching for all the blueprints that you may have acquired since the game launched, and that the rest of the rewards associated with the expedition aren't quite worth the hassle of doing all of that over again. So what if that wasn't the case? Rory Norris for PC Gamer asked, how long do you see the loop of doing the expedition and then re-earning blueprints remaining interesting? To which Watkins replied, I think I said this even early on when we did the initial blog post about the system. It's a bit of an experiment. Because we didn't want to force resets on everyone, then now we're on this road of how do we make it interesting enough for a large amount of people to participate in this? There are issues with the thing itself. The currency system we have today was just what we had time to develop, and we reduced it, of course, for Expedition 2. Just because even though at the time we calibrated the 5 million coins around what the average player's economy looked like, it still overshot in terms of how much people felt like they had to engage with it, or how much they felt compelled to chase it. But because of other things that were actively in development, we didn't have time to shift the system to what we intend to do next, and we want to tie more gameplay loops into it, and not just make it about currency value. So ideally, we'll be able to talk about that fairly soon. Fairly soon kind of seems like it gives the window of in the near future, like an Expedition 3 or 4 perhaps, but that's pure speculation. But a follow-up was asked, have you considered allowing players to bring a couple of their favorite blueprints across, almost like a safe pocket system, in order to prevent players from getting stuck trying to find one in particular. To which Watkins replied, "That was an idea we had even before launch. It's a tricky situation because the blueprints in particular are such a power elevation. Now you have the autonomy to craft this thing very deliberately, and does that fit in? And then, as well, if we ever make, and we have made adjustments to the blueprint drop rates and things like that. But I certainly don't think it's off the table. Of course, it's a very rational thing for players to want to do. Like, I work really hard for these, and please let me have just a few. So yeah, I wouldn't say no to any idea along those lines. It's mostly about how you balance what is the part of the core run-up through progression, and blueprints are a significant part of that, of actually getting them. I wonder if we can address that particular pain point by additional changes or systemic changes to how blueprints are found, acquired, or learned, rather than needing to feel like they have to come along with the expedition system. So, giving you better or more autonomy over how you acquire blueprints, for example, might alleviate some of that concern on that side of things. So I don't want to overburden the expedition system with things that we might not want to do. So okay, it kind of seems like they're leaning towards maybe, but it's not necessarily in the cards. So how do you end up maybe having some suggestions, potential outcomes here for this? How do you in the future get more people to take part in the expeditions? If skill points aren't going to be the main primary item of reward forever, how do you go above and beyond? I still personally think, this is my own sort of idea here with this, the blueprints are kind of a great way to do that. But again, if they're trying to alleviate the overall systemic changes of this and change some of the ways that we see blueprints actually unlocked or earned, it's not something that it's going to be the main focal point. So in my opinion, I still think you could end up doing something cool with like a passed on knowledge type of system that allows 1 or 2 per season perhaps to carry over, but also not taking away too much from the overall in-depth nature of what we have for systemic changes on how blueprints are earned. In lore, the element of your raider building their caravan and heading out in the unknown is what creates that open space in Speranza for a new raider to come in, where your new reset level 0 character comes into play. But regardless of that, I think a knowledge transfer would be a cool thing to end up having. Like, your raider leaves behind things that he learned for the next generation, recipes and crafting for the next raider, so that in lore it's like, hey rookie, here's what helped me out, my parting gift to you. But in a gameplay loop sense, I think it would be kind of a great way to incentivize a reset, but keep some of those valuable loot items, and again, kind of take the pressure off of trying to get skill points here and there. And that's where I think it ultimately balances itself out as well, because yeah, you could keep these super rare blueprints that otherwise may not have a very easy way to unlock, like some of the ways we're seeing evolve here out of the last couple of updates with quest items, project items, event items, stuff like that, where you have this super rare blueprint, but you're not going to be able to use it immediately, because while you still have that blueprint learned from day one, you still need all the crafting items for it. You still need all the bench upgrades and the things to upgrade those benches to get to that point. So while it is something you have the shortcut from, okay, I don't have to search for another couple of hours to find this specific blueprint, or maybe in some cases a lot of hours, you still need to put in that time to end up working to the point where you can end up even using that item. So to me, it's kind of the middle ground between a balancing act of having it immediately, but also still taking hours and hours and hours to try and find that stuff throughout the progression after a reset. I think that maybe 1-2 blueprints per expedition is something that realistically could be nice, and kind of like a balancing act that doesn't become too top heavy at that point, making each blueprint 5 or 10 million per value. Like maybe 5 million is that first blueprint, 10 is that second as your cap, because realistically, if you're gunning for it, if you're playing a lot, you'll end up exceeding 5 to 10 million depending on how much you play throughout the season. Like if you're explicitly going for value, you're going to do that in 2 months likely. But it's also a tough enough sort of threshold that you're not going to be bringing over like 10 blueprints season over season. Now, do I think that will happen? As much as I'd like to say that's a cool idea, and I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be sweet if they picked up on that, I also don't think that we will see that happen particularly soon. I do think that what we see with blueprints in particular, as we talked about recently, is that they're just implementing new ways to reliably unlock items. While I don't discount the idea of potentially some carry forward mechanisms, all recent examples point towards a lot more reliability in terms of unlocking and retooling your inventory after an expedition, increasing that loot pool as we saw with the Hurricane map condition, adding previously very exclusive blueprints like the Tempest, Bobcat, Volcano, Vita Spray, and stuff like that, all into another segment of how you can unlock it. The focus seems to be more so on availability. Ultimately, as we mentioned before, while it takes away some of what the prestige of having an exclusive blueprint would be per se, like you don't have the bragging rights of, hey man, I got the Tempest blueprint and you don't. Haha. It, from the perspective of Embark, checks almost all the boxes they want at just the more minor suggestion of a semi-lessened rarity or exclusivity of specific blueprints at hand. It reduces gear fear, allowing players to use those items more, and by extension of that reduction in the gear fear, likely allows a player to consider the expedition more positively if they know that it's not going to take another 200 hours to find those blueprints again, and it alleviates some of that stress on the other end of actually looking for it. So for us players, it's a non-guaranteed situation, a semi-hurdle that could vary in amount of time that it takes to get over said hurdle, but from the perspective of Embark, tweaking those things is all positive. Now, as for the timing of when we see these changes to the fundamental systems and underlying features and rewards of Expeditions, honestly, it's entirely speculation. It could be Expedition 3 upcoming in about 2 months. It could be Expedition 8. It could be Expedition 15. We don't know. The only thing that explicitly was mentioned was when asked, do you think it's something that's likely to see major change? Watkins mentioned, I wouldn't say there's going to be a major change in one giant drop, but definitely we're going to start to adjust and shave off pain points and make sure that those incentives we are providing are catching what people find compelling. So this, again, it could be something that starts with Expedition 3, could be something that starts Expedition 4, but we're going to see it progressively rolled out and not just one major overhaul to the system all at one time, which is something that does give a little bit of clarity on how they decide to take this, and where it's something that's more open to feedback and reception rather than just all at once and people being like, well, you've ruined the system, now I don't want to do it at all. Also, one thing to note is that with these progressive alleviations of problems, again, coming back to it, we've already seen with the Shrouded Sky update, the loot pool has been kind of drastically changed. We've seen these different projects, these different events coming in that are offering more blueprints and other rewards that would otherwise be hurdles and reasons to not do the expeditions. Those are being sort of rolled out already. Ultimately, at the very least, Embark are conscious of the systems at hand and that it needs a few reworks and tweaks before it's incentivizing to more players and to get the level of involvement up even higher, which for them is ultimately the goal, right? For you and I, it's less stakes, but for a developer, your end goal is to always get people engaging, both with the systems that you've built out for your game, but also by extension, playing and engaging quite literally with your game, playing more and more. And a reset does just that with players attempting to get all their gear, all their leveling stuff, and everything back from before that reset. So if you can end up getting more people experiencing that, you as a developer are winning in every single one of those categories. You're checking all the boxes there. So we'll see what happens in time, but there are plans for the expedition system in the near future. Some of what we see right now will not always be the case, and how that changes in incentivizing more players to end up taking part in the expeditions, that's something we'll see in time as well. So let me know your thoughts down below. What do you think of the expedition if you did it here? What do you think of the reset? Are you liking the idea of being able to start over again fresh? Are you kind of regretting it? Let me know. But if you guys enjoyed the video, you found it out all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so don't miss a single thing regarding all things Arc Raiders and even more FPS content. I'd love to have you in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.